So I'm excited today to be here with Erika Pulley-Hayes of WMFE. She's been in her position almost a year, so we're getting to see a snapshot in time of what it's like to be a public media CEO on the cusp of a year in the job. So Erika, my first question for you is, what has surprised you about the role now that you've had almost 12 months under your belt?
What has surprised me? Can I preface this first by just saying, I hate to put so much emphasis on the pandemic, but the pandemic really did surprise me. I wasn't prepared or anticipated that we would have this kind of crisis. And I think I was here for 6 or 7 weeks before the pandemic hit. So everything was turned upside down pretty quickly. So the good thing about that, though, is that I hadn't been here long enough to become attached to anything. And so it was kind of like starting, in some respects, from a clean slate. I think, one of the, not a surprise at all, but I knew the first priority was to make sure that we were financially sound. Because the pandemic was declared just before we were going to go into a pledge drive.
Oh, wow.
That was bad timing to do fundraising, at least so it seemed. And, the decision about whether or not to do an on-air pledge drive was one that carried for a few months, and ultimately we ended up doing one later than I had wanted to, but we did do one. But it was a struggle to get the staff on board with that. And so I would say that that's been a surprise, the reluctance of staff to change when it was imminent that we needed to do so.
Did you face challenges with your corporate support as well, like many stations losing sponsors as a result of the pandemic?
We absolutely did, Deanna. I think April, May, and June were hit really hard. We started to get a little bit of a recovery in July, August, and now we are at pre-pandemic levels in sponsorship, which is very different from, I know a lot of my peers around the country cannot say that because they're in locations that are much more restrictive right now than we are here in Orlando.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I hadn't thought of that. And that would be an interesting thing for us to look at as an industry, the more open states and how that's affecting corporate support. Well, talking about Florida, so you made a big move to take this job.
I did.
Both geographically and from a national organization to a station. So can you tell us a little bit about what that experience has been like for you?
Seems like a lifetime ago now. So much has happened in this past year, but it was very eye-opening. I think having been at the CPB for 15 years and being a grant provider, working on policy and driving some initiatives forward. And I remember being at CPB, and I would say, I'd have to make questions like, why don't they do this? or why don't they do that, or why haven't they done this, or why haven't they done that? And so I know now why they don't do this and why they don't do that, because I'm on the other side, because we're small staff. CBB small staff too, but better staff than probably the average station. And there's always a lot of moving pieces in the station. You know, we've got everything from we're off the air to we've got a problem at the tower to, you know, revenues not coming in, sponsorships down, membership might be down, especially if you're not doing a pledge drive, to people are complaining about something they heard on NPR or another one of our programs that we carry, or it's just a lot of different things that go on at a station that you don't realize when you're at the national level. A lot of stuff goes on at the national level too, but it's different. And so now I guess now I've got the best of both worlds. We're the worst.
I hope the best. Well, you have the best perspective.
I definitely do. I definitely do. I've got a pretty broad perspective because I know what it is like to be on both ends. I know what it's like to, you know, have to be accountable for the federal appropriation. I know what it's like to have to be accountable to your community. I know what it's like to have to be accountable to your board. So, you know, all of those constituents are equally important.
So in January, you'll have been in this position a year. And prior to starting the recording today, you and I were talking a little bit about, you know, what it's like to be a CEO, some of the challenges you face. And I thought it would be good just to ask you, as you're approaching this year and considering, you know, our organization is so focused on helping women attain the highest leadership positions, what do you wish you'd known before you went into this job? And what have you learned so far that you think is helpful for your future growth?
I wish I had, and I still wish this because I haven't quite maximized this skill for myself yet, but I wish I had, you know, better fundraising skills, you know, to be honest. I didn't have that skill coming here. I knew it was one that I needed to learn and still do, and I'm working on it and I'm getting better every day. But, you know, it's hard to connect with your donors right now in this pandemic if you can't meet with them. And I've done a lot of meetings by Zoom, but it's not the same when you want to make that personal connection with someone who, you know, has given the organization a lot of money and has the potential to make transformative gifts for us. So that's something that I wish I knew and had a better handle on before I got here.
Now that you've have almost a year under your belt, what have you learned and what do you think will be helpful for the rest of your career at this point in time?
I've learned how to prioritize. Well, I know how, a different level of prioritization. I am a person that gets things done. I'm a doer, and it's hard to be a doer in this role. You've really got to delegate. You've got to use those delegation skills to ensure that everything gets done, because it's easy to get sucked into everything. I learned that pretty quickly. And so I've had to create some boundaries so that I can focus my attention on the things that have the greatest impact for the organization overall. So that's what I've really learned how to do. to let go, and lead.
That is really important. And I actually want to pursue that just a little bit more, because I think, from having worked at CPB and being at a lot of the national meetings over the years, the discussion about sort of the evolution of the GM or CEO in our industry and the need for being a friend-raiser, and seeing that as a primary role or face of the station is fairly new. I mean, I think it's been in about the last 10 years. And we have a whole community of CEOs in the industry who I think hold on to their expertise in whatever vertical they came up in. So whether that was news and production or development or marketing or engineering, whatever it is. And then like to your point, get super sucked into that area of focus. I've been in meetings and people have joked about it's not your job to program the station when you're the CEO. Right. So I'd like to hear your thoughts about sort of your evolution in realizing that in the last year, because I think it's obviously an important point for everyone in the industry. But I think for women coming into these positions, because there's so few women in these positions, learning it early and quick is probably critical to your success. I would.
Absolutely. I think though, and there's also, coming to the station from where I came from the station, I'm not an expert in any one of those areas. I am a business person. That's what I do. I do business. And even we may be a nonprofit, but we are a nonprofit business.
Sure.
And so I, of course, never having been at a station before, when I first arrived, I felt the need to get a little bit of education in station operations. So I was, some might say I was too far in the weeds on some things, but I thought it was really important for me to do that, to even be able to assess where we were as an organization. But I'd say within the first 6 months, I knew that I needed to pull back. And I started to do that, and I'm still doing that. And I'm, working on my little whiteboard back here, which buckets do I need to focus most of my attention on? That helps me not get sucked into the minutia of the day to day. And so I learned it pretty quickly. And I have a good friend in the system in a similar role. And I think it might have been around June that I said to this person, I'm pulling back. I'm not doing certain things, and they said that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You're on the right track. So, okay.
So, Erika, you and I were talking a little bit about the things you learn on the job when you reach the C-level, and you were referencing some cultural experiences you've had that surprised you being in this new role. So can you share that with us?
I think I don't know how many conferences I've been to over the years where, we talked about, changing the culture, how we need to change the culture in public media. And so coming here with that perspective, I was surprised how much of what was happening here was just a deeply rooted culture. I'll give you an example. WMFE was once a radio and television station joint licensee, but it divested of the television station in 2012. That is a very deep wound, which left many people that have been here a long time still hold on to, the good old days of TV. And some of the things that we have in place, processes, practices, are carryovers from the TV days. And, just culturally, if I would say to my assistant, why do we do this? Why do we do this? And she'll say, oh, I don't know. This is how it's always been done. And I would say, okay, but what's it intended to do? What's the point of this? And she said, oh, I don't know. We just always do this every year. And so I got a lot of, this is just something we always do without a real explanation for why we do it this way. And I think the culture is starting to change a little bit now, because now if I ask that question, she won't say, this is the way things are always done. She said, I know things are changing now, but this is what we used to do. So that was a surprise of just how deep and the culture really permeates the organization at all levels.